She had every reason to let him die. He sent her to the basement. He walked past her every single morning like she was furniture. He never once said her name. And on the night his own brother arranged his murder, she was the only person standing between him and a body bag. She was a maid. $95,000 in debt. No power, no protection, no reason to pick up that phone. But she did. Here is what no one tells you about power. The most dangerous person in the room is never the one holding the gun. It is the one everyone decided not to see. She was invisible, and that invisibility let her hear everything. One thin wall, one overturned bucket, one phone call just before midnight. That is all that separated a king from a grave. This is a story about what happens when the person you treated like nothing turns out to be the only one willing to save you. Sometimes your salvation arrives wearing an apron and carrying someone else's pain. If this story hits something inside, you hit like, drop a comment telling me, have you ever underestimated someone who later changed everything for you? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every week, I bring you stories that make you rethink the people standing quietly in your life.
His own brother. I gave him every chance. I smiled. I played the loyal second. I waited for him to see that the world had changed. That sentiment was a liability we could no longer afford. But he never saw. He just retreated further into the past. So I planned. The next 3 hours were supposed to be a cleansing, a necessary surgery to cut out the rot. But it all fell apart. And because of who? The girl. The one he treated like dirt. The one he sent to the basement. She was the one who risked everything for him. This wasn't loyalty. It was a sickness. A symptom of the weakness I was trying to cure. This changes nothing. It only proves how deep the infection goes. I will not fail again. This story is not about a broken heart. It is about a broken crown. And I am the only one strong enough to fix it. This is my legacy. Chicago breathes differently at night. It is a beast of opportunity for those who are not afraid to take what they want. While the citizens sleep, we build empires. Money moves through hidden channels. Deals are sealed in darkness. Power shifts with a quiet understanding. Chinatown laundromats hide fortunes. The harbor is our private road. Every transaction, every building, every silent threat traces back to my family, to the Ferraro name. But Alio treats it like a burden. At 36, he is already an old man. Cold, yes. Precise, yes. But his ruthlessness is a performance. A mask he wears to hide the decay within. His empire is a machine I understand far better than he does. He hides behind his reputation. They call him the Ghost, a clever name for someone who is already fading away. He disappears because he is hollow, not because he is strategic. His mansion in Lake Forest is a tomb. Greystone, a fitting name. The iron gates do not keep others out. They keep him in. The air inside is stale with unspoken things. All that dark leather and marble feels like a funeral home. There is no life in this house. Only rules. Only silence. My brother's power is built on fear, but fear is brittle. It shatters. I will build my power on something real, on strength, on vision, on the future he is too afraid to face. Only one man did not fear him. Hugo Caruso, 40 years old, a loyal dog bound to a dying master. His hands are rough. He has buried Alio's mistakes for years. He has mistaken my brother's weakness for strength since they were young. Hugo followed him when he was just a boy playing boss. He thinks that loyalty is a virtue. It is a chain. Hugo is the only one who can enter Alio's office without permission, the only one who dares to question him. He even knows about the room, the secret shrine on the second floor. But he protects that secret. He protects the weakness. Hugo does not understand. Hugo's devotion is a fool's investment. It began 17 years ago. Alio, bloody and pathetic, pulled Hugo from some mess and uttered a few desperate words. Live, I need you. And with that, he bought a lifetime of servitude. In this house of shadows, where respect is a currency of terror, Hugo is the final wall protecting my brother's fragile world. But even he does not see everything. At the end of the hall is a locked door. Behind that door lies the proof. The reason Alio must be removed. It is the secret that proves he is just a ghost. And I am the rightful heir. That room is his heart. And I will be the one to finally stop it from beating. The lock is old brass. Everyone avoids that door. They know it is his sacred place, a place where a king should not be. He keeps the only key in his pocket, close to his chest, as if he is guarding a weakness instead of a treasure. Inside, there is no power, no marble, no empire. It is just a small, plain room, a wooden table, a single candle, and on a piece of black velvet, a cheap music box. It is made of walnut. The carvings are worn. It is worthless. But to him, it is everything. It belonged to our mother, and it is the anchor that is drowning him, drowning us all. I remember that day too, 28 years ago. I was younger. I watched him cling to her hand on that street in Wicker Park. I saw the city through my own eyes, not his. She stopped at some dusty old shop. She found that box. When she opened it, a sad little tune played, a song for children. She smiled at him, only at him. I was there, but she never saw me. Do you hear it? She asked him. A lullaby, for when you are afraid. She bought it with her savings, money we needed for other things. Every night, that box played. Their ritual. Their world did not include me. It was their secret garden. No father, no family, just the two of them, and that sad, circling song. Then came the purge. I was there too, 19 years old. They broke down our door. She pushed him behind her. He tried to be a hero. He got that scar on his jaw for his trouble. Then the shot. She fell. Her hand slipped from his. He collapsed into a world of grief. He made her death his own personal tragedy, as if he were the only one who lost her. He let it shatter him. He let it define him. And our father. Our father withered. He became a shell, and then he was gone. He left the family to Alio, 25 years old, and consumed by grief. He built this empire on a foundation of pain. He thinks that makes him strong. It makes him a slave to the past. Every night, he goes to that room. He unlocks the door. He lights his candle and plays that song. In the dark, he is not a boss. He is not a ghost. He is just a little boy who cannot let go. And tonight, when the maid's warning proves useless, when he walks into my trap, I will finally set this family free from that little boy and his sorrowful tune, my brother. He clutched that music box like it was our mother's hand. He thought no one knew its secret. But I knew. Pain is a weakness, a flaw in the steel. Alio let his flaw define him. That little box was his anchor to a boy who should have died that night. It was proof that under his armor, he was still fragile, still broken. If that box ever shattered, the last piece of the boy I once knew would shatter with it. But I carried my own wounds from that night. I was only 15. I was not in the room. I hid. I buried my face and heard everything. I heard her last breath travel through the floorboards. When I came out, I saw him. Alio, drenched in blood, cradling what was left. No one came for me. No one asked if I was breathing. In that silence, something inside me cracked. A fracture that has spread for 17 years. Today, I am 32. I am the perfect younger brother. My smile is not like Alio's. His is a warning. Mine is an invitation. It is a promise of safety that I never feel. White teeth, a firm grip, eyes that never waver. I have nothing to hide because I have buried it so deep. But look closer. Always look closer. The smile is a lie. My mouth performs, but my eyes are still that boy in the closet. The smile is a mask I wear for the world. In the family, I manage the flow of money. I make our sins look like virtues. I clean every number until it shines. It is a delicate, necessary art, but my art is never praised. At every meeting, Alio sits at the head of the table. He speaks. I sit beside him. I nod. I write. I obey. My opinion is a ghost in the room. No one asks what I think. Alio commands. I execute. That is the law of this family, a law written by our father. On his deathbed, he called for Alio, only Alio. You are the heir, he said. Hold this family together. I stood outside that door. I heard it all. My father never spoke my name. It was as if I was already dead. So I keep smiling. I keep saying, I am here for you, brother. I play my part without complaint, but inside, I keep a record. I count every interruption. I count every decision made without me. I count the seconds I stare at that empty chair, the one at the head of the table, and I think, that seat is also mine. This feeling did not explode. It did not need to. It just grows. A quiet poison I feed myself each day. A poison they will all eventually drink. And I did more than count. I planned. Ford Bellini was my first piece. 34 years old, a loyal dog guarding a door. He served for more than 10 years and never earned a seat at the table. He was a tool left to rust. I saw the bitterness in him. It mirrored my own. When I am in charge, I told him, you will guard nothing. You will sit next to me, a promise of respect, the very thing he had starved for. It was that simple. Ford was mine. Perry Rizzo was a different case. 30 years old, a clever accountant with a secret. He had skimmed tens of thousands from us 2 years ago to settle a gambling debt. He thought no one knew. But I always know. I did not expose him. I simply spoke to him as a friend. I know what you did, I said. But that is our secret now. Just remember who is keeping it for you. There was no threat, only understanding. Perry understood perfectly. He was mine now, too. 3 men. A silent pact made in the shadow of my brother's throne. We were a family within the family. I am the mind. Ford is the fist. Perry is the numbers. We move in silence, a shared look, a slight nod, a coded message in the dead of night. And Alio, the great Alio who trusts no one. The ghost of Chicago. He trusts me completely, because we share blood, because I am his little brother, because I always smile and say, I am here for you. But he does not hear what I say in the darkness. As I watch his window, I whisper the truth. You have everything now, but not for long. While I nurtured my garden of shadows, a file landed on my desk. Just another name in another corner of Chicago. A woman, 27 years old, standing before an iron gate, a canvas bag on her shoulder. Her worldly possessions amounted to a $95,000 debt and a wool scarf. Noel Ashford. Brown hair, gray eyes. Malnourished, but her posture was straight. Her gaze was direct. Her knuckles were white on the strap of her bag. A fighter. The file said she was not always this way. 3 years ago, a nursing student. University of Illinois at Chicago. Top of her class. Ambitious. A plan for her life. A small apartment. A stable job. A life caring for her mother, Ruth Ashford. The mother was a graphic designer. Her income was a shifting sea. It rose and fell. She was too poor for insurance but too rich for aid. The great American trap. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 3 lung cancer. She never smoked. The file noted the irony. The doctor said it just happens. A betrayal from within. The daughter, Noelle, received the news in a hospital hallway. Her world collapsed. She dropped out of school that week. Her mother was her only priority, an emotional, foolish choice. She took 3 jobs: waitress, cashier, cleaner. She slept 4 hours a night and ate 1 meal a day, all for her mother. But the bills were relentless. Chemotherapy, radiation, scans. The numbers climbed, a tower of debt she tried to hold up alone. She borrowed from friends, then credit cards. Then she came to us, our lenders on the south side. She signed our papers. The interest rates were brutal. She was desperate. She never knew her small payments were part of our vast network. Her payments were processed by Perry Rizzo. Her debt was approved by me. I never saw her name. She was just a number on a page. 3 years went by. The mother fought. The daughter fought. The file detailed nights spent in a hospital bed. The mother's final words were, "Don't spend more on me." The daughter refused to listen. "You cannot leave me." But she did leave, on a winter morning. The daughter sat beside the cold body and did not cry. Her world had already ended in silence. Then reality returned. $95,000. No degree, no family, evicted. I closed the file. A life reduced to a single page, a consequence I chose not to see. She was just another number, another debt to be collected. I provide order in a world of chaos. A debt is a promise. It must be honored. This girl, Noel Ashford, had a debt of $95,000, a legacy of her mother's sickness. The street would have broken her. They would have sent bricks and threats. I sent Hugo Caruso. I offer a different way, a structured path. You owe. You cannot pay with money, so you will pay with time. It is a clean equation. There is no cruelty in it, only balance. I gave Hugo his instructions. No pity, no threats, just the 2 choices: anarchy or my order. She chose order. She arrived at the estate with a single bag, another gear in the machine. That is all she was to me. My world requires perfection. The staff are its guardians. They exist to maintain the quiet and the dark. She was good at it. A shadow who understood her place. She moved through the halls without a sound. She cleaned. She worked. She was invisible. This is how it should be. She was paying her debt. She was erasing a stain. I expected nothing more from her. I barely registered she was there at all. She was to follow the rules. They are simple. They are absolute. Certain doors remain closed. Certain names are not spoken. My office at the end of the second-floor hall is one such place. It is not an office. It is a sanctuary, a tomb for a memory I refuse to let die. The staff knows this. They have always known. Never approach that door. Never look at it. Never think of it. My trust in their obedience is the foundation of my peace. My house is my fortress. Every rule is a stone in its wall. The city was a distraction. Business pulled me away. Deals and betrayals. I left that morning feeling the weight of it all. Hugo was with me. The estate was left in the care of its silent guardians. I assumed the order would hold. The meeting ended early. I drove back seeking refuge. My home is the only place the outside world cannot touch. Dust. It is what she saw. A simple layer of dust. The instinct of a servant overriding the instinct for survival. A fatal error. A door pushed open. A choice made in silence that would scream through my entire world. It was old. It held a life within its wooden frame. It was the last piece of her I had left. The only thing that still carried her sound. A sound I had kept safe from the world for years. The girl's hands touched it. Her tears fell on the walnut. She did not understand what she was holding. It was not a box. It was a heart. It was my mother's voice, singing only for me in the dark. She lifted it. Her hands were clumsy from work. Her vision was blurred by a sorrow that was not her own. And then she dropped it. The sound was small, but it was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It echoed up from the second floor. A crack that ran through the foundation of my life. I knew before I saw it. Something had broken. Something that could not be replaced. The melody died. The heart inside the box stopped beating. I found her on her knees, surrounded by the wreckage, trying to put the pieces of a ghost back together. She was holding splinters. My hand was empty, trembling. My shadow fell across her. My house was silent. My mind was screaming. I looked at the floor, at the death of the only gentle thing I had ever known. And I looked at her hands, the hands that had caused it. I moved slowly. Each step was a lifetime. I picked up the lid, split in two. I saw my own fingers shake. In that moment, she was no longer a debtor. She was a destroyer. Who told you to enter this room? My voice was quiet. It had to be. The rage was too big for a shout. I am sorry. Her words were meaningless. It in my hand, tracing the fracture. Not a piece of wood. A face. Her face. I spoke, my voice a ghost in the room. This is the only thing I cannot replace. The girl said nothing. She only wept. But her tears were wrong. They were not for fear of me. They were not for her job. She was crying because she understood. She understood the hollow space a mother leaves behind. She saw my last piece of that world shatter. And I saw her scarf, her own worn tether to the past. Her tears were not for a servant afraid of her master. They were for a person in pain. That recognition was a violation. It unsettled me more than any knife. The last person who looked at me and saw pain instead of power was my mother. Hugo appeared, a welcome shadow. Welcome. His flat voice cut through the memory. Let me handle it, boss. I did not turn. The silence was a weapon. Then I spoke. No, she still owes. She is not going anywhere yet. Hugo nodded. He did not ask more. He would not have seen the truth anyway. This had nothing to do with debt. This had to do with her tears. She cried for me. And I, Alio Ferraro, the ghost of Chicago, had no defense against that. I turned back to the girl. The cold returned. My voice was a cage. From now on, do not look me in the eye. Do not speak unless you are spoken to. Do not touch anything that is not on your list. She lowered her head. Yes, sir. Get out. She left, her legs trembling against the floor. I shut the door. The lock clicked. Alone, I slid to the floor. The cracked lid of the box was cold in my palm. For the first time in years, there was no one to witness the pain on my face, or so I believed. The next morning, I sent Hugo. Pack your things. You are moving to the basement. No explanation was necessary. It was a sentence. I pictured the room, a narrow bed, a bare bulb, no window, concrete walls, a cold floor, the endless hum of machines, damp, cold, a box. She placed her bag on the bed. She looked around. She said nothing. She understood. This was not a room. This was an erasure. Her work became an endless cycle. 5 in the morning. Wake up. Mop. Clean. Prepare. Launder. Iron. Scrub. Polish. Wipe. Wash. Cook. On and on. No rest. Until midnight. She had no schedule now. No routine. Her work was everything no one else wanted. At every hour, no one else wanted it. And it was never enough. But the labor was not the point. Pain I knew she could endure. Her file told me she had worked 3 jobs for 3 years. Her body knew suffering. The silence was the true punishment. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I did something worse. I made her cease to exist. Every morning she would whisper, "Good morning, sir." I walked past as if she were a shadow on the wall, a piece of furniture unworthy of a glance. Sometimes I would enter a room where she was working. She would have to stop, step back into a corner, and stand completely still until I left. The new rule forbade her from sharing my space unless ordered to. I was making her invisible. No one spoke to her. No one looked at her. A ghost in the mansion, untouched by light. That silence was a blade. A scream at least acknowledges a presence. But to be looked through, as if you are air, makes you doubt your own existence. Then one afternoon, a small thing. She was clearing the table. A glass shattered in her hand. A shard cut her palm. Blood bloomed, bright red against the white cloth. She drew a sharp breath, but she made no sound. She hid her hand. She used the other to clean the mess. She kept working. I sat at the head of the table. I read a file. I never looked up. I was sure she thought I had not seen. She went to the kitchen. I heard the water run. 5 minutes later, I sent Hugo. He placed a box of bandages on the counter. He did not look at her. Boss said to give you this. Then he left. I watched from the dining room. My eyes never left the file. I showed no sign that I had given the order, but I had seen. I had seen, and I had chosen not to look. That act would confuse her more than any cruelty. If I truly hated her, why care about a bleeding hand? In the kitchen, I heard the whispers. Bree Whitman, Margot Sinclair. Why does he not just fire her? The debt is pocket change to him. Why keep her here? Margot, who had been here the longest, knew better. I have never seen him keep anyone after they touched something he forbade. Not once. Then something is different, Bree said. Something is different. The girl stood at the sink, hearing it all. She did not turn. She did not answer. She kept washing with her left hand. Her right hand, wrapped in my bandages, throbbed. She had no answer. She did not dare ask herself the question. That night, she returned to her box in the basement. She took out her mother's scarf. She pressed it to her face, seeking a ghost. I am still trying, Mom, she whispered. At that same moment, upstairs, I sat in my room. The candle was unlit. The music box lay broken, silent. I looked at it for a long time. My hand rested on the cracked lid. My fingers traced the break. In the darkness, I closed my eyes. 2 floors apart. One holding a frayed scarf, one touching a broken box. 2 griefs, identical. And this shared pain was a contamination. While I was lost in this silent war, something else was growing. Not pain, betrayal. Wednesday, close to 1 in the morning. The house was dark. I was on the second floor. Hugo was in the security wing. The staff were all asleep. There was only the sound of the wind and the faint crunch of gravel. 3 pairs of shoes moving toward the garage. Tristan was first. He stood in the dark. The armored cars were sleeping beasts. The air smelled of oil and cold rubber. He did not need light. Darkness was his element. Ford Bellini arrived next. Then Perry Rizzo, a shadow slipping through the door. They did not greet each other. Tristan spoke. His voice was a low hum. This Saturday. Ford and Perry did not seem surprised. They had been waiting. Tristan laid out the plan. A fake deal. An old warehouse. By the river. A partner who wanted to meet face to face. The kind of deal I always handled myself. He thinks I am distracted. He thinks the girl has made me weak. Come. What about Hugo? Ford needed reassurance. His question was expected. Hugo is the only complication, I said. I turned to Perry. That is your task. Perry agreed, his voice sharp and exact, like numbers on a page. I have a fake report from Englewood, on the south side. I will fabricate a crisis. A problem with a small shipping line. The kind of issue Hugo insists on handling himself. He trusts no one else. I will not call him. The alert will be sent through the internal system. It will look routine. Hugo will not question it. Ford pushed back. I cut him off with absolute certainty. Hugo will not question it. Southern emergencies happen monthly. It is our busiest channel. He will see the alert. He will go. And when he learns it is a lie, it will be far too late. Silence hung in the air. Then I continued, my voice low now, each word deliberate and heavy. Emilio will be at the warehouse alone. No Hugo. No guards. Only him. And us, Ford said. It was not a question. It was a statement. And us, I confirmed. I require 4 of Ford's men inside, hidden, heavily armed. When Emilio enters, they lock the door. The matter will be concluded in 5 minutes. Perry swallowed hard. Not from fear. It was the first time he heard the unspoken plan said aloud. Ford was motionless. He waited 10 years for a seat at the table. He was tired of guarding the door. 5 minutes was a small cost. What happens after? Ford asked. I faced him, and in the garage's deep shadows, my smile emerged. The wide, warm, perfect smile I used for 17 years to earn their trust. But tonight, it was what it always was, a mask. After that, I said, I am the only Ferraro remaining. I control everything, the family, the empire, all of it. Ford will sit beside me, not as a guard, but as an advisor. Perry will manage all finances with full authority. Everything will change for us. Perry gave a quick, firm nod, like signing a final contract. Ford simply met my gaze and spoke one sentence. I will be ready. I looked at them both, then added, my tone light, but my words like ice. He trusts his little brother. He has always trusted his little brother. Emilio looks at me and still sees the 15-year-old boy, the one who hid the night our mother was killed. He thinks I am still that child. He thinks I still need his protection. I let the smile vanish, and that is his greatest mistake. No one spoke again. Ford and Perry left the garage one by one, minutes apart, their feet silent on the gravel until the night consumed them. I stayed behind, alone. I looked up to the second floor of the mansion, to a door that was always locked. I knew my brother sat behind it. I stood there longer than I had to. In the stillness of the lake forest, no one heard my whisper. I am sorry, Mom. But Father chose the wrong son. What I did not know, what none of us knew, was that on the other side of that garage wall, separated by mere concrete, Noelle was standing in the laundry room. She was there, doing her job. It was almost 1 in the morning. She was still working because the last load was not yet finished. And tonight, there was more laundry than usual. The room was in the basement beside the garage, separated by a wall no one thought to soundproof. Who would ever be in a laundry room at 1 in the morning, except for the machines? I imagine she was folding towels when she heard our voices. At first, it was just a muffled sound. Unclear. It blended with the washer's drone. She would have ignored it. Then, the machine began its rinse cycle. The humming softened, and in that quiet moment, one word reached her through the wall. Emilio. Her hand must have stopped. The towel would have slipped from her fingers. It fell to the floor, and she would not have picked it up. She would have stood still, her head tilted, just listening. The voices carried, not completely clear, but she knew more than one person was speaking. She moved closer to the wall, slowly, lightly. Each step on the concrete floor made no sound. She pressed her ear against the wall. It was cold. The concrete's chill seeped into her skin. But she would not have cared. Now she could hear more clearly. The warehouse in Pilsen. Hugo will not be there. He will come alone. Her heart must have started to pound. She recognized the voices. The first was mine. Gentle, confident, controlled. The second belonged to Ford, low and brief. The third, sharp and quick, was Perry. She must have pushed her ear harder against the wall. She held her breath and listened. When Emilio walks in, lock the door. Everything ends in 5 minutes. The only Ferraro left. Each sentence must have felt like a blade. She could not believe what she was hearing. His brother, his own blood, planning his end. She wanted to pull away, to move from that wall and pretend she heard nothing, to return to folding towels and forget everything. She took one step back. Then her foot hit something. The water bucket. It tipped. Water crashed across the concrete. The loud clatter echoed in the laundry room. In the quiet of the night, the sound was an explosion. Noel froze. On our side of the wall, every voice stopped. Silence. Total silence. Then Ford's voice, low and sharp. Is someone there? She must have clamped both hands over her mouth. She would not have dared to breathe. Her heart was a wild thing in her chest. I heard the footsteps, heavy, coming closer, not toward the wall, but toward the laundry room door. Ford was circling through the basement hall. He was coming to the laundry room. She must have looked around in desperation. The room was small. The light bulb was dead. Only the blinking red eye of the dryer offered any light. Two large industrial washers stood against the wall. A pile of unfolded clothes sat on a table. She slid to the floor. She squeezed behind the largest machine. She pulled her knees to her chest. She pressed her back to the cold wall and made herself small in the dark. Water from the bucket spread across the floor. It touched her feet, freezing cold, but she did not move. The doorknob turned. The laundry room door opened. Light from the hallway spilled inside. It cast a long strip across the wet floor. It stopped less than a foot from where Noel was hiding. Ford stood in the doorway. She could not see his face. She saw only his shadow stretching over the floor. It was large, dark, and threatening. He looked into the room. The machines ran with a steady hum. The dryer blinked red. The clothes lay in a heap. The bucket was on its side. "There is no one here," Ford said. His voice was still wary but less tense. Probably a stray cat got in, or the bucket tipped over by itself. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The strip of light on the floor vanished as the door swung shut. The footsteps moved away. They went up the stairs, then they were gone. Noel still did not move. She sat there behind the washer in the pool of cold water. Both hands covered her mouth. Her whole body shook beyond control. Tears ran through her fingers. They fell onto her knees. But she made no sound. Not because she was brave. It was because she knew that if Ford had come back, if he had found her, she would never have walked out of that basement alive. I do not know how long she sat behind that washing machine. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. I only know that when she finally stood, her legs were numb and stiff from the cold water. Her whole body was shaking so badly she had to brace herself against the machine to stay upright. She stepped out of the laundry room. She looked left. She looked right. The basement hallway was empty. No one. She hurried back to her room. Every footstep forced to be light, even when everything inside her screamed to run as fast as she could. Out of this house, out of this city, to a place where no one knew her name, and no one whispered about murder through a wall at 1 in the morning. She went inside her room. She locked the door. She checked the lock again. Then she sank to the cold concrete floor with her back against the door, her arms wrapped around her knees. She tried to breathe, but the air would not enter her lungs. Her chest was tight. Her head was spinning. My words from the other side of the wall kept repeating, circling, never stopping. The warehouse in Pilsen. No bodyguards. 5 minutes. The only Ferraro left. She covered her ears. It was useless. Those words were no longer outside. They were already inside her head. Noelle sat there in the darkness, and a battle began inside her. Tell someone. Tell Emilio. The man who had sent her to the basement. The man who forbade her to look him in the eye. The one who treated her like an object he wanted to forget. The man who, every time she said, "Good morning, sir," walked past her as if she were air. What would she even say? "Sir, your brother is trying to kill you." Would he believe her? A maid drowning in $95,000 of debt. Tristan is my brother. My blood. For 17 years, he has been my right hand. He manages my world. He guards my secrets. He is the one person I do not have to watch. Trust in this life is a rare thing. Trust in family should be absolute. This girl, this basement shadow, had shattered my past. Now she held the key to my future. But I did not know that. I only saw the destroyer, the source of the silence. I wanted her gone, forgotten, a problem to be erased, just like the debt she was supposed to be paying. It had to be done. I felt the rightness of it settle deep in my bones. For years, I watched him drift, a ghost in his own house. He was trapped by memories, weakened by a grief that should have ended long ago. He clung to the past while our future withered. He made me do this. He forced my hand with his weakness. Our family, our name, deserved a leader, not a warden of a dead woman's memory. This was not murder. It was a correction, a painful, necessary surgery to save the body of our empire. I am the one strong enough to make the cut. I carry this burden so that our name can live on. He would let it all turn to dust. I would forge it into steel. The pieces were all in place. Hugo, his loyal shadow, would be sent on a fool's errand. It was a clean, simple move. My brother would be alone, for the first time in years. He trusts me. He gave me control of our finances, never once looking over my shoulder. That trust was his final, fatal mistake. He saw a brother. I saw a vulnerability. Our father would have understood. He would have seen the rot and known it needed to be purged. I am my father's son. Emilio is only our mother's. And that is why he has to go. I remembered his office, the neat desk, the cold precision. He managed details, but he had lost the vision. He could no longer see the whole board. My plan was perfect. Every contingency was covered. My partner in Pilsen was reliable, greedy, and had no loyalty to my brother. The girl cleaning his office was nothing. A fly on the wall, deaf and blind to the games of men. He never even saw her. He looked through people. He saw them as tools or obstacles. That was a lesson he taught me well. And tonight, he would become the obstacle I removed. The last 3 days felt like an eternity of calm. I worked, I spoke with him, I played my part, but my mind was already in the future, in the silence after the warehouse. I felt no guilt, I felt no fear, only a cold, hard certainty. I saw the darkness he was walking toward, not as an end, but as a beginning, my beginning. Now Saturday had arrived. The night felt heavy, pregnant with the change that was coming. I was the storm that no one could see, but everyone would feel. I was remaking our world. I sent the message. It was simple, clean. Everything is ready, brother. The partner is waiting. That word, brother, was a small, sharp blade of my own. A private pleasure. He would read it and feel secure. He would see care and diligence. He would never guess it was his death warrant. He stood before his mirror, a king in a castle of ghosts. His perfect suits and blank expressions were a mask for the hollow man inside. The gun at his side was a prop. He had not truly used it in years. He had grown soft. He carried it like a memory. Tonight he would face men who carried them as tools. The call came, right on schedule. I made sure the report from the south side sounded urgent. Hugo's voice was sharp with concern. A shipment in trouble. A team gone silent. The perfect bait for a loyal dog. My brother frowned, I am sure. The timing was an inconvenience. He hates disorder. This small chaos would blind him to the larger one I had created. He would see it as a nuisance to be managed. He would not see it as the first move that would lead to checkmate. I knew he would send Hugo. He always chose logic over instinct. Go. One word. That was my brother. The quiet, unshakable authority. The voice that left no room for argument. It was the last order he would ever give his most trusted man. Hugo would obey. He would drive toward a phantom problem, his loyalty blinding him until it was too late. With him gone, the board was clear. Emilio was alone. He would handle the warehouse himself. He would walk into the night, confident in his own strength, never knowing that his greatest strength, his brother, was the one who had arranged his fall. The house was mine now. I knew he would stop at the door, the locked room at the end of the hall. He always did. He would stand there, looking at the wood, but seeing the broken music box. Seeing her. It was his ritual of weakness. That melody was the lullaby of our downfall, and he could not let it go. It was proof. He was not fit to lead. He was chained to a ghost. I was breaking his chains and my own. I would never let a memory hold me captive. I would burn the past to the ground to secure my future. His footsteps on the marble were a countdown, a steady rhythm marking the final seconds of his reign. He walked past the girl on the floor. I am sure he did not see her. He saw only his destination, the car, the warehouse, the deal. He was a man of purpose, focused and blind. Her fear was a small, meaningless thing. Her trembling hands could not stop the turning of the world. It is happening. She was right. But she could never understand what it was. It was not just a death, it was a transfer of power. The beginning of a new chapter, written in blood. My chapter. The house grew silent. The engine started. A low rumble that was the sound of my victory. I checked the time. 11:51. Almost midnight. A new day was about to be born. I thought of the useless phone calls someone might try to make. Hugo's phone would ring unanswered. My brother's phone would soon be silenced forever. For a moment, a cold flash of what I was truly doing hit me, the face of the boy who followed me through the garden, but I smothered it. This was not a choice between two brothers. It was a choice between the past and the future. And I have always chosen the future. She knew the last four numbers. A detail from a staff file. An accident of memory. Numbers she associated with her own loss. It was all she had. A desperate guess in the middle of the night. A call from the basement to the master of the house. An impossible breach of protocol. 123. She dialed. She was shaking. She pressed the final number. The signal went out. I was walking to the garage, to the meeting Tristan had arranged. My phone vibrated. An internal call, a red alert, from the basement. I frowned. Who would dare? The line chimed close to midnight. An interruption. I almost dismissed it. My finger was on the screen, ready to silence the noise, but my gut tightened. Not a thought, but a feeling honed over 20 years. Calls at this hour are never good news. They are necessary news. I answered. Speak. The word was a piece of ice. Her voice on the other end was a thin wire stretched to its breaking point. Sir, please do not go to the warehouse tonight. A vacuum of sound followed. I could picture her on the other end, holding her breath, fearing my response. Who is this? My voice was slow, deliberate, each word a test. Noel. Noel Ashford, the maid. Another pause, longer this time. I let the silence hang, a weight on the line. I considered ending it, walking out to the car, and driving to my fate. But something held me. Her fear was genuine. My voice returned, still cold, but now sharp. Focused. You have 30 seconds. She took a ragged breath, the first one in what sounded like days. The words spilled out, trembling but exact. Wednesday, laundry room. The wall is thin. She heard them. Tristan, Ford, Bellini, Perry, Rizzo. My brother and my men. A plan. A false report to send Hugo away. I would be alone. And when I walked in, her voice faltered. They said Tristan would be the only Ferraro left. I did not speak. I did not question. I simply listened. Through the phone, I heard my own breathing change. It grew deeper, slower. I was absorbing each word, letting each piece of betrayal settle into place inside me. Then I asked a single question, the only one that mattered. Why? She was confused. What, sir? I clarified. Why are you saving me? My voice was low, barely a sound. The question was not a trap. It was real. I did not understand. In my world, actions have a price. She was offering a gift I had never received. Noel began to weep. The sound was raw, uncontrolled. But she spoke through the tears, needing me to understand. Because my mother taught me that when you can save a life, you do not ask whether that person deserves it. You just save them. She took another broken breath. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And because if your mother were still alive, she would not want you to die tonight. Not like this. Not by your brother's hand. Silence. A blade of silence. I thought the connection was lost. Then my voice came back. It was not cold. It was not distant. It was the voice of a man who had been woken from a long, dark dream. Lock your door. Do not come out. Do not call anyone. I will handle it. The call ended. I stood in the hallway, phone in one hand, car keys in the other. The engine was running in the garage, a low hum calling me to the slaughterhouse. I looked at the keys. Then, very gently, I placed them on the table. I did not throw them. I did not rage. I set them down as if they were part of a life that was no longer mine. A life built on a lie I had told myself. I walked upstairs to the second floor. In my bedroom, I opened the bottom drawer, the one I never wanted to open. Inside lay the second gun, heavier, darker. It was a tool for endings, not discussions. I picked up my phone and called Hugo. He answered in 2 rings, his voice tight. Boss, there is nothing here on the south side. I got here and nobody is here. Something is wrong. I cut him off. Come back. Drop everything. Come back now. Hugo paused, hearing the change in my voice. He had heard this tone only 3 times in 17 years. It meant someone was about to die. I am on my way, boss. I ended the call. I dialed another number from memory, a number that lived only in my mind, for moments when words had failed, and only blood would speak. It answered after 1 ring. Gather the team, I said, my voice flat, like the surface of a dead sea. Pilsen Warehouse, tonight, quietly. The building waited at the end of a forgotten road. It sat by the Chicago River. The air smelled of oil, dark water, and wet stone. It was once a place of business. Now it was only 4 steel walls, a roof full of holes and darkness. A place where normal people never went after dark. In my world, it was a place for meetings that were never spoken of again. At 11:30, my brother arrived. I pictured him stepping through the back, moving across the broken concrete. He would be checking everything. 4 of Ford's men would be hidden, armed, waiting for him to give the word. Ford would be at the door, a hand on his gun, watching the road. Perry would be near the back. Perry never held the gun. He counted the money. He kept the secrets. Tonight his job was to erase the evidence. Tristan would look at his watch, 11:55. He will be here on time, he would say. He would be certain. Alio is always on time. He got that from our father. Precise. Ford would nod, his eyes never leaving the road. The minutes would stretch into a tense silence. The only sounds would be the river and the wind. Then Ford would speak. Headlights. They would all look. 2 beams of light cutting through the night, moving steadily toward them. A black SUV. My vehicle. My license plate. Tristan would breathe out, a weight lifting from his shoulders. A man who thought his long wait was finally over. Exactly on time, he would whisper. A small smile of victory would appear on his lips. He never learned to be anything else. He would raise his hand, the signal to end my life. But the signal would never be given. Before the order was spoken, the darkness behind him would move. My men, already inside, would strike from the river entrance. Ford would be on the floor before he could make a sound. 10 years of guarding doors. 10 years of ambition. Now his face would be pressed against the cold concrete. The table Tristan promised him was now gone forever. Perry would not fight. He would raise his hands, his face pale, his eyes shut. As if not seeing it would make it untrue. My men would drag them both to a corner and hold them there against the wall. There was not much to. This was the only way. Once the truth was on the floor, words were useless. In the warehouse, just the 2 of us remained, my brother and I. 3 steps separated us. 3 steps filled with 17 years of silence. Light from outside cut through the dark, drawing our shadows long and thin. In that unforgiving glare, we faced each other. We were not the boss and his man. We were not the winner and the loser. We were just two boys who once shared a room, a life. Two boys who cried when our mother was taken. Now we stood in this ruin by the river. Guns and lies were between us. He spoke first. The silence was too heavy for him. "How long have you known?" he asked. He tried to sound like a king, but I heard it. I heard the small tremble in his voice. "Long enough," I answered. Just those words. I watched him, and I saw the thing I had waited 17 years to see. The thing hidden behind his fake smiles and loyal act finally broke free. "You took everything." My voice was loud. It bounced off the steel walls around us. "Father chose you. It was always you. From the start. I was nothing. A ghost following you for 17 years. I just nodded and obeyed. I was never asked. I was never given a seat. I was never seen. My breath came hard and fast. My chest burned. My eyes were hot, but I would not cry. I learned not to cry the night I turned 15, hiding in the dark. I am father's son. I am mother's son. I have the family name, but to them, to you, I was just the second one. Not good enough for you, not strong enough for you, never worthy. My voice faded. The silence came back, heavier now. I watched my brother. I waited for the anger. I waited for the cold mask he always wore. But his face was not angry. It was not cold. It was just sad. It was a sadness I had never seen. The sadness of a man watching something beautiful break, knowing he could do nothing. "You think I wanted this?" he said. His voice was quiet, not the voice of the boss, the voice of an older brother. "You think I am grateful for this life? I lost our mother. I held her while she died. I was 19 with her blood on my shirt, with a knife scar on my face. I lost my youth. I lost my trust. I lost the ability to sleep a single night without hearing guns." He stopped. He took a slow breath. "And now, I have lost you." Those words were the heaviest. They fell into the space between us like a stone hitting water. The ripples would never end. I swallowed hard. I forced the tears back. I had been doing that my whole life. "So what?" My voice was hard, but it felt thin, like glass. "You will kill me. That is your way, the way of this world. Betrayal is death. Your law, Father's law. Do it." I opened my arms. My chest was bare, a perfect target. "Do it, Alio." The silence was long, so long I thought I had imagined it all. But there was no shot. My brother just looked at me, at my eyes, our mother's eyes, at my face, our father's face. He looked at the 15-year-old boy he failed to protect. Then he turned to Hugo. His voice was empty again, but I heard the break in it. "Take him away. Get him out of the city, out of the country. Leave him somewhere far." Hugo just stared for a moment. Then he nodded. Alio looked at me one final time. "If you ever come back," he said. And now his voice was ice. It was the coldness I knew. It was not a threat. It was a promise. "Next time, I will not talk." I looked at him. My mouth opened. I wanted to say something, but there were no words. I just stood there. My arms felt heavy at my sides. For the first time, my smile was gone. There was no mask, just the face of a younger brother who had destroyed everything. Hugo came forward. He took my arm. I let him lead me to the door. I did not fight. I walked. My feet were made of stone. My head was down. As I passed Alio, I stopped, just for a second. I did not look at him. My body wanted to stay. My mind knew it was over. I kept walking, into the dark. I never looked back. The car doors shut, the city lights blurred through the window. Hugo would handle it, he would handle me. In this world, some things are never said aloud. The answers are not for men like me anymore. I was alone in the back of a car, driving away from my life. The headlights cut through the darkness. My shadow was gone. I did not move. I said nothing. I just sat there. And if anyone had looked into my eyes, they would not see a traitor. They would not see a victim. They would see nothing at all. The kind of nothing that comes when you try to save yourself, but lose the only person who shared your name. Back in the city, at that same moment, Noel was probably waiting, holding her breath. She had made the call. She had chosen her side. She did not know what happened in the warehouse. She did not know if her choice had saved a life or ended one. All she could do was wait. Every sound would make her jump. Then her phone would vibrate. She would look down. A message from him. From my brother. Her eyes would be blurry. On the screen, 5 words. It is done. You were right. She would read them again and again, believing she had done the right thing, believing she had saved a good man. She would press the phone to her chest, and she would cry, tears of relief. Thank God, she would whisper, believing in a God who had just abandoned me. The sun came up. It felt slow, hesitant, as if it knew what happened in the night. The house on the lake would be quiet, but a different kind of quiet, a lighter silence, as if the whole estate could finally breathe again. She would wake at 5. Habit would pull her from a sleep I could not find. She would stand before her small mirror, and she would see herself. Her eyes would be red. Her hands would shake. She would wonder what the morning would bring. She would not know what he would say. He might thank her. He might send her away because she had seen too much. In our world, both were possible. She would go upstairs. She would start to clean, wiping tables, sweeping floors. Her hands would work, but her mind would be somewhere else, with me, in the warehouse, on the phone, thinking of those 5 words. It is done. You were right. Then she would hear footsteps. It would be Hugo, in the doorway. His face would be a mask, but his eyes would be different. He would look at her not as a maid, but as someone who had changed the game. The boss wants to see you, he would say. In the sitting room. Her heart would beat fast. She would wipe her hands, and she would follow him. The sitting room would be filled with light, sunlight on black marble. Alio would be by the window, his back to her, a coffee cup in his hand, and she would see it for the first time. How tired he was, not from one sleepless night. It was the tiredness of loss, the kind that lives in your bones, in the shadows under your eyes, the weight on your shoulders, the tiredness of a man leaning on sunlight because he had nothing left. He would turn, he would hear her, they would look at each other, and she would see his cold gaze. The one I had seen my whole life, the one that passed right through you, looked through me as if I were glass. But this morning his eyes were different. He was not just looking, he was seeing. Sit down, he said. His voice had changed. I knew it instantly. It was not a command from a boss. It was one person speaking to another. I sat across from him. My back was straight. My hands were in my lap. My eyes met his. The old rule, the one about not looking him in the eye, had vanished. He set his coffee cup on the windowsill. He spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully. I did not sleep last night. I did not reply. I only listened. But not because of Tristan, he continued. He glanced at the window, then back at me. Because of you. Because of why you called me. The silence was heavy for a moment. I treated you badly. I know that. I felt a tightness in my chest. It was not fear. It was the shock of hearing him admit his cruelty. I sent you to the basement. I overworked you. I looked at you every day, and I chose to see nothing. His own reasons had seemed righteous inside his own mind, but they were hollow now. You made one mistake, a single mistake, and I made it your life sentence. I bit my lip to stop the tears. They came anyway. And you, he said, his voice dropping lower, with every reason to let me die, to think I deserved it. You still called. I could not stop the tears, but I did not look away. I looked at him. My voice shook, but my words were clear. Because my mother taught me that when you can save a life, you do not stop to ask whether that person deserves it. You just save them. He closed his eyes. It lasted for only a moment. But in that moment, I saw my own pain reflected on her face. A flicker of a shared wound, a quiet sorrow we both understood. My mother knew that look. The thought came to me as a whisper. We stood in the morning light. Two strangers under one roof, finally seeing each other. Two halves of the same grief. We were children who had lost our mothers. We were adults clinging to what was left. I moved toward the table. I placed the thick envelope before her. I told her to open it. She did as she was told. Inside there were 3 documents. The first was a release from her debt. $95,000. My signature and family seal made it final. It was all gone. The second was a payment. It was enough to complete her studies at the university. It covered her classes, her books, and her life for 2 years. The third was a key and an address. An apartment on the north side. A safe place for a student. A new life under her own name, Noel Ashford. Her hands were shaking. She stared at the papers. Then she looked at me, her eyes clouded with tears. I told her the Ferraro family was owed nothing. I told her she was free. She said she could not take it. I told her she could. My voice was not harsh, it was absolute. And I told her she would, because she was the only honest person in my world. The only one who told me the truth. Not from fear, not for gain, but because it was right. I paused and looked away, toward the gray light of the window. My mother once told me something, I said, more to myself than to her. A lesson I had long since buried. Do not judge a person by their rank. Judge them by what they do when they have nothing to gain. I turned back to face her. You had nothing to gain last night. And for that, I trust you more than anyone. The people you trust. Her tears were an affront, a performance. Yet she did not look away. She did not hide her face. These were not the tears of the weak or the frightened. They were something else. Something I had not accounted for. She held my offer in her hands, a ticket out of this world, and then she spoke words that made no sense. I will accept it, but give me 1 more month. I studied her, looking for the angle. 1 month here, she said. I want to stay. It was a trick. It had to be. The debt was gone. Her fear was gone. So what was her play? Because, she paused, and her voice became a blade, soft and sharp. Because no one should be alone after that. She spoke of my brother. She dared to speak of my wound, the wound of betrayal, a cut far deeper than death. She knew this feeling. The silence in a vast, empty house. The ghost of a person you once loved. I watched her. For a very long time, I said nothing. The morning light caught the tears on her face. I saw no pity there. I saw no calculation. I saw only a reflection of my own solitude. A person who knew my specific kind of darkness. And something inside my chest shifted. A mechanism I thought had rusted shut moved just slightly. A phantom of a smile, a twitch of a muscle long dormant. It felt foreign, unsettling. You are the strangest person I have ever met, Noel Ashford, I said. It was the only truth I could offer. She did not smile, but the crushing weight in the air seemed to lift. Just for a moment, just for 1 month. I watched her stand at the gates, the same worn bag on her shoulder. But she was not the same person who had arrived. Inside that bag was my money, my power. But she carried something else now, something I did not give her. She carried hope. Hugo drove her. He stopped the car and spoke to her. I saw him say it. "You are a good person." 3 simple words. From a man who deals in violence and silence. Those words from him were a testament. She smiled at him. She did not look up at my window. She did not need to. I was there. I watched the car pull away. It drove down the long road. It grew smaller and smaller. It vanished behind the trees. And I remained at the window. The house was quiet again. But this time the silence was different. It was heavier. The place was small, simple. A window looking out onto a quiet street. A home. It was something I could give, but never possess. She unpacked her few belongings, her clothes, her new books. Then she hung a piece of worn wool on the wall. An old scarf. She hung it with such care, as if it were a masterpiece, as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. For her, it was. 3 days later, my package arrived at her door. No name, no return address, just her name in black ink. She would take it inside. She would place it on her table. She would open it. And inside, she would find the music box. It was not the original. That one was mine. This one was new, clean. But when she lifted the lid, she would hear it. The same melody. The very same song. The notes would fill her small apartment. The music from the locked room on the second floor. My mother's lullaby. The song Noel had broken. Now it played for her. Tucked inside was my note, a few words written in my own hand. For the girl who heard the music and did not walk away. E. I imagined her reading it. I imagined her looking at the music box. Then at her mother's scarf on the wall. Her tears would fall. But they would not be tears of pain, or fear, or despair. They would be the tears of a survivor. Someone who had walked through my darkness and emerged. At that same moment, I sat in the room at the end of the hall. The door was open. For the first time in 17 years, the door was not locked. On the table, the old music box sat, repaired. The cracks were still visible, scars left behind. The music it played was slower now, a little broken, like a voice raw from screaming. But it played. I opened the lid. The melody filled the small room. I sat alone in the candlelight. I listened to my mother's song, and my eyes grew wet. Not from pain, not from loss, but because she had seen me. Not the monster, not the ghost, not the man this city fears. She had seen the boy who lost his mother, the brother who lost his brother. She had seen the lonely human sitting in the dark, and she had not run away. The one I called brother had wanted me dead. The one I called debtor had saved my life. I had built an empire on blood and money. I believed in nothing else. But her loyalty came from nowhere. It was not bought. It was not forced. It came from a place I did not understand. She had nothing, and she chose to do what was right, even when she was terrified, even when she could have lost everything. I thought one mistake was all it took to define a person, but perhaps I was wrong. What you do after the mistake, that is what shows your true self. This is my story now. It is a reminder. The quietest person in the room is sometimes the only one telling the truth. I wonder how this story makes you feel. Have you ever been so wrong about someone? Have you ever looked down on a person only to realize they were your salvation? Share your thoughts. I want to know what is in your heart. Every story you tell could be a warning, or it could be a map for someone else lost in the dark. If this story found you, press the like button. Let me know I am not alone in this new understanding. Share it with someone who needs to see the truth. And if you have not already, subscribe. There are more stories hidden in the shadows. Your presence here is a small light. It helps me to keep searching. To all of you watching, I wish you strength. I wish you clarity, and I wish you peace with the ones you love. Thank you. Goodbye. I will see you in the next story. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community